where some of this comes from.
So basically like the 1,200 calories is pretty much just diet industry wanting us to.
Yeah, yeah. And so the standard recommendation is 2,000 calories a day for, for a woman. And that comes from studies that were done where they looked at people who are weight stable and asked them, what kinds of things are you eating? When are you eating? Sort of they had them do food logs for a few days. And they came up with 2,000 calories. But the problem with food logs is that because there already is this stigma about being in a larger body, people often underreport or undermeasure or what have you. So the 2,000 is, from the studies that I talk about in the book, which are much more accurate than self-reported data, that's where we get the 2,500 calories from. And so that seems to be a more realistic number for what a woman actually needs.
Yeah.
And then, so obviously we have this 2,000 as the baseline number that's out there as to what a woman needs. And then messaging about, you should lose weight, you should be smaller, all of that. And so then you're told 1,500 or 1,200. I mean, like 1,200 is all over the place as a number to eat to lose weight. That's, for most women, that's their basal metabolic rate. That's the number of calories that they expend in a day if they're just lying in bed doing
like
nothing.
In a coma,
else.
right? I think that's what I've been told. Like in a coma, that's like your calories.
What's that?
If you're like in a coma, that's like your calories. That's what I've been told, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Because that's the energy your body needs to pump your, to get your heart pumping, for you to breathe, for all the cells inside you to do their work, making protein and DNA. So then there's nothing left over for all of that extra movement you're doing. And, about 10% of what we eat is burned in the digestive process. So, it's just 1,200 is ridiculously low amount. And then that's definitely not going to support somebody, for the long term, for sure.
For sure. Yeah. That's super informative. So let's go back to like food a little bit. So you talked about people are restricting women with HA, usually restricting carbs and fats. So I was one of those people. So I get a lot of people, especially with keto, like carbs are so bad. And now I love my carbs. But can you talk about the importance of carbs and fat in recovery and just for women in general?
So our bodies need all different kinds of macronutrients just to not only for fuel, but also for building blocks. Yep. So, our bodies are constantly making protein, which is built up from amino acids. So the protein that you eat is digested into its components, the amino acids, that can then be used to make other proteins within your body. Carbohydrates are a great source of quick energy, which we often need, especially as you're moving your body. Your sort of any movements that you're doing are most easily fueled by carbohydrates. Your hypothalamus senses glucose levels and insulin levels. And so if those are consistently low, that can be a form of suppression on your hypothalamus. And so that sometimes eating keto alone can just cause a woman to lose her period, perhaps even if she is getting enough fuel, but just having the constantly low glucose and insulin can be a suppressive signal. So we need fat because that's broken down into its component fatty acids and then used to make some of our hormones, used as other building blocks within the cell. So all of the macronutrients are, our body uses them. It's not just for fuel, it's also for building blocks. And each of the components also send signals to our hypothalamus. So there are different hormones that are activated when you eat fat or when you eat carbs or when you eat protein. And that information is transmitted to your hypothalamus. And so that can help it to then send signals like, we haven't had a lot of carbs, so now I'm going to crave some carbs because that's what my body needs. So when we feel cravings like that, that's actually a sign from our body that it needs that kind of nutrient. When you're pregnant, this can be particularly surprising because often, especially in the first trimester, you might find yourself craving carbs, and like a lot of them, for me, it was potato chips. Like all I wanted to eat was potato chips.
Love it.
Potato chips and fried eggs. And, it's just listening to those cravings is, we think of our cravings as coming from our mind, like our conscious mind, but really it's much more likely to be coming from our unconscious mind because it's hormonal signals that our brain is sending out being like, I need carbs. So often when women are restricting, like when you are doing keto or something, you find that if you eat, you eat one cookie, then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I have to eat all the cookies. And it's because your brain is like, yes, I need this. And so now I need more, more, more because you've been restricting for so long and not giving me what I need. And so now I'm going to make you eat all of it.
Yep. The binge
So,
cycle, binge restrict cycle is a real thing.
mhm. Yeah.
That's crazy. Okay. So you talked about earlier about cortisol, especially from exercise and stress and, managing your stress. So how important is that in recovery, the stress management piece?
So the mental stress management, I think, is almost the hardest piece of this.
Agreed.
Because we live in a society where we are in stressful situations a lot. So I often, I encourage women to, look into meditation or, there's an app called Headspace,
Love it.
journaling, all that kind of thing. It has to be something that works for you. Like for me, meditation, no, not gonna happen.
Yeah.
But for other people, it works really well. Yoga is great because you're getting a little bit of movement and you're also getting, you're doing some calming and introspection and thinking, feeling your body. And, so that kind of thing can be really helpful. So, I mean, stress also, I think we often put a lot of pressure on ourselves that is simply because we're perfectionists and we feel like we have to do everything the best that we absolutely can. So letting go of some of that self-imposed stress can also be really helpful. You look around and you look at other people and you're like, oh, well, they only half-assed that job and they're still doing just fine. So maybe I can start half-assing some things too and be okay with it.
Totally.
I learned a big lesson about this from my current boss. I work very part-time as a project manager at MIT, and there are deadlines for submission of various things. And especially when I worked for him a lot more previously, I was at 32 hours before. Now I'm down to 4. But I was getting so stressed about these deadlines, and I would be like staying up all night and trying to get other people to do things. And it was probably the most stressed I've ever been in my entire life. I had one time when I was at the grocery store, and I usually remember my frequent shopper card number, and I couldn't remember it for the life of me. I had to call my kids and be like, kids, what's our number? And that was like such a wake up call to me. Like, I am so stressed in this job that I'm not even able, like my memory is going. I mean, that's awful. And so, but my boss was like, oh, it'll be fine. And I was like, wow, like I just can't do that. But then I've learned from him, and he's always been right. He's always like, he's never suffered any consequences for missing these deadlines.
That's so
So
funny.
I'm like, if he's okay with it, and so now I'm like way more blasé, and if we miss a deadline, it's it's okay. And I'm so much less stressed. And so just kind of figuring out what things are truly important and what things you can let go of, I think is, a good lesson to learn from that kind of example.
Yeah, I think it's almost hard too, because like for me, I almost felt like the recovery itself was stressful because it's like you're doing all these things that are scary to you. You're not going to the gym, you're eating so much food, and like do you have any advice for like women going through that, like how to manage the stress of recovery and keep your stress down?
Well, I think again, there's a lot of sense of you have to do this perfectly.
Yeah.
You have to eat 2,500 calories every day, and you have to not exercise every day. And if you have to run for the bus one day, oh my God, is it the end of my? And no, I mean, I think that's another really important lesson to learn is that you do not have to be perfect.
Right.
Like you do the best you can. If you're good enough most days is going to be good enough. So run for that bus, go get the bus. If you slip up one day and you're like, oh my God, I really want to go for a run, it's not going to be the end of your recovery. It's not like you've done all this work, you go for one run and you're back at square one again. It's like, maybe it's a half a step backwards, and then you eat a little bit more food and you rest the next day, and it's fine. So I think sort of, again, letting go of the perfectionism and being okay with just doing the best you can. Like that's
so hard.
That's really, because I see so many people stressing about recovery, and it's like that, it's not helping to stress.
Yeah.
So, you
I
know,
was one of those people. I was like, I'm so full, but I haven't eaten 2,500 calories. I'm like 2,400 or like whatever. And it's like, why am I stressing about this? This is so,
yeah, exactly. You know, 2,400, 25. I mean, it's so much better than 1,200
yes.
that, you know, it doesn't have to be exactly 2,500 calories exactly every day. You know, some days it might be more. If you're hungry,
Yep.
you eat more. If you're super full, maybe you don't eat as much.
Exactly.
You know, like somebody who's recovering from, say, an eating disorder, you know, I strongly recommend getting a team of people
Yes.
around you to help because, you know, I know that my book has been helpful for some people with eating disorders, but certainly I'm not an eating disorder recovery specialist, and I really encourage people to find a team of people who are going to support your recovery, making sure that they're not, you know, not going to tell you, oh, you should only get to X weight or you should only eat X number of calories a day, you know, really supporting you in a way that is not focused on weight and sort of out of the whole diet culture idea of like there's this healthy weight, and if you go beyond that, then oh my god, like things are gonna
agree.
So I think for somebody that's in that situation that has been severely underfueling for a very long time, they probably should have some medical supervision in sort of trying to eat more, because there is something called refeeding syndrome where your electrolytes can get all out of balance, and that can be really dangerous. And also in recovering from anorexia, you probably do have to push your body more. You have to push past the fullness because your signals have gotten so messed up over the years of underfueling. So when I'm talking about like, you can, you know, sort of be a little bit loosey-goosey with, you know, are you eating 2,400, are you eating 2,600 or whatever? And, you know, if you feel full, don't, you know, maybe you don't push yourself that day. Sometimes you do have to push yourself. So it's really like, again, as with everything else in this recovery process, it has to be very individualized, and you know, you need to do what's right for you and work with the team, work with other people, find a dietitian who can help you. You know, all of that can be really beneficial.
Totally. That's really helpful. Love that. So, okay, what should women look for like on their labs to really diagnose HA? And can you talk about the difference between like an HA diagnosis and maybe a PCOS, if there's a difference in that?
Sure. So there is a chapter in the book, chapter 4, on diagnosis that has a lot of information about all of this stuff. So the blood work that should be done should be looking again at all of those different causes of amenorrhea that we talked about earlier. So looking at prolactin, looking at your thyroid. So hormones you would test for PCOS would be free testosterone, androstenedione, DHEAS. The hormones that are sort of most relevant for an HA diagnosis are FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, and LH, luteinizing hormone. It can be useful to have estradiol and progesterone tested as well, not really for diagnostic purposes, but more because that can help you kind of assess where you are in a menstrual cycle. So not necessarily good at the time of diagnosis, but maybe down the road a little bit.
Yeah.
So then if you have HA, most likely your LH will be on the low side of normal. Maybe it can be normal, but for most women, I think about 80% LH was, I'm trying to remember the graph from the book. I have a figure where I show the distribution of LH in the survey respondents. I think it was something like 80% had an LH of 2 or less.
Yeah, I think so.
And then, but there is a range. FSH can also be suppressed in women with HA. That tends to indicate sort of more severe hypothalamic suppression. So for both FSH and LH, normal is sort of maybe around 6 to 8, 9, something like that. So lower than 6 is what I typically look at as being suppressed to some degree. LH in PCOS is often on the higher side, up to 3 times what FSH is. It can be a little bit higher in women that are recovering from HA. So like that is not a diagnostic criterion for PCOS. It's just something that's correlated. Let's see, for PCOS, you would be looking for elevated androgens, so high free testosterone, high androstenedione, DHEAS. 17-hydroxyprogesterone is another thing that can be useful to test in someone that's sort of manifesting PCOS-like symptoms. That tests for a disorder called congenital adrenal hyperplasia, which manifests with PCOS-like symptoms, but it's actually a totally different condition. So a couple other things, often in women with HA, free testosterone tends to be quite low because we have high sex hormone binding globulin, which binds up our hormones. And so you can have an elevated level of testosterone, but if you have high SHBG, then the level of free testosterone is actually quite low. So those are some of the things that are good to test and to look at. And obviously, hyperlactin can suppress your reproductive hormones. So if you have hyperlactin, then you would go down a different pathway. Same thing if your thyroid is out of balance, if your TSH is very high or very low, then that can also have implications for your reproductive system. So those kinds of things you would want to address first, and then give your body some time to reacclimate from getting those under control before you then look at, is my amenorrhea continuing, or has it been fixed by this point?
Would you say that, because for me, for example, my LH was lower, but it was 3, so it's not as low. My FSH was normal, my estrogen was low but normal, but I still had HA. So I was trying to talk myself out of I don't have HA because it's normal, but my gut knew
yeah.
So would you say that there is an element of gut instinct too sometimes?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you also have to take your lifestyle and your history into account. Yep. If you don't have a period, your LH is low, or I've seen people with perfectly normal LH that there's no other explanation for their missing period. They eat more, exercise less, and get their period back. So, you can have HA without any overt way to diagnose it. But, if you've lost a bunch of weight in the past, if you're exercising on a daily basis, if you're doing a lot of high intensity exercise, if you're restricting your food deliberately, sometimes women with HA do not even restrict deliberately, but they're just not eating enough to support the exercise that they're doing. So there, another study found that they looked at a group of men, of course, because most studies are done in men, and they had them just go to a buffet, eat what they wanted, and measured how much they ate. And they had them do 800 calories worth of exercise on a bicycle, and then sent them back to the same buffet. They ate more than when they had not exercised, but they did not eat 800 calories worth of more. So it was more like 400 calories. So if you're not sometimes if you're not consciously making sure that you're making up for the exercise that you've done, you can be underfueling. So that can even be harder for people to accept that it's HA, because they're like, but I eat, I eat all the time. It's well, if you're running for 4 hours a day, then you have to eat a crap load to make up for that.
Yes.
Are you really eating enough to make up for that? Or are you finding it hard to eat because your digestive system's kind of slowed down after you're running, and so you're not eating for a couple of hours, and maybe you're going for your run without having eaten beforehand, and so your body's getting into this huge energy deficit, and that can suppress your hypothalamus.
Totally. So we talk about this concept of being all in. I think a lot of people probably know it because Stephanie Buttermore is making it really, famous and all these things. But what is considered all in? I know it's in your book, but what do you consider being all in?
So in my mind, all in is eating a minimum of 2,500 calories on a daily basis and cutting out high intensity exercise. And that's basically it. It's easy to say and often way harder to put into practice.
Yep.
Both just from a physical standpoint and even more so from a mental and emotional standpoint.
Totally.
So, some women can go all in right away. They read my book. They're like, oh my God, I had no idea. And I'm going to do this right now. Maybe they've been diagnosed with osteoporosis. Maybe they're wanting to get pregnant a year ago. And so it's wake up call. I'm going to do this right now. For others, especially people who experience a lot of anxiety and use exercise and controlling their food to kind of help with that, it can be really challenging to go all in cold turkey. So sometimes it's more of, okay, I'm going to increase my calories by X, and I'm going to cut out 1 day a week of exercise, and do that for a little bit, see what happens. And then often when you've taken those steps, it then becomes, you see that, okay, I'm actually okay on the day that I don't exercise, or yeah, I do feel better eating this food. So now I can take the next step and increase more, add back the carbs, cut out 2 more days of high intensity exercise. So, it's really, again, this is something that's very individual. And so I do actually work with women one-on-one, and this is part of the process that we go through, is figuring out what steps to recovery are going to work for that one individual person, her situation, what her goals are, kind of taking all of that into account.
Love that. So I guess being all in, so what is, like, how long is the recovery period? How do people know they're recovered, or like when they can go back to exercising or eating intuitively? Like, what is your thoughts on that, and how does that work?
So generally, I say wait until you've had 3 periods before you think about changing either your eating or your exercise levels. This comes from a couple of different places. One is that our menstrual cycles tend to be sort of self-perpetuating. So the hormones kind of follow on one after the other. So your estradiol decreases at the beginning of your cycle. That gets your hypothalamus to make more gonadotropin-releasing hormone, which then increases follicle-stimulating hormone. The egg grows and matures, it releases estradiol. That leads to the estradiol gets to a threshold level. That leads to the LH surge, which causes ovulation. That leads to increased progesterone. And then, if you're not pregnant, the progesterone decreases, estradiol also decreases, and there you are back at the beginning of the cycle again. So if you've only had one cycle, you've only had one period, your body's only done this once, and it's very easy for any change to, for a hypothalamus to basically be like, nah, I'm done,
Yep.
like, that's it. And so you also have no idea what your cycle is like. So I really, really encourage women, as they're working on recovery, to get in tune with your body, to learn about the signs of ovulation and what that means, because really, ovulation is the driver for all of this. It's not your period. The ovulation is the most important part of this cycle. So learning when you ovulate, what your signs are, and then once you have that first period, you can start to track and figure out, okay, what cycle day am I ovulating on? How long is my luteal phase, which is the time between when you get your period, when you ovulate and when you get your period. It's often short in women that have recovered from HA or are recovering. So that can be another really good marker of how your body is handling, any increase in exercise or changes in food, changes in food habits. So having 3 cycles kind of gives you a chance to learn what your body is like, what your ovulation is like, what your normal period is like, to then have that as a gauge for, okay, I'm going to start running, 2 days a week for 10 minutes. That might be a good place to start. How is that affecting my cycle? If it does nothing for one cycle, then the next cycle you can add back a little bit more. I also don't recommend changing food and exercise at the same time, because then you don't know what variable is causing any issues. So either, start incorporating a little bit more movement. Again, the slowly is really the best way to go. You can absolutely get back into all forms of exercise down the line. I've worked with women who have then gone on to do Ironman triathlons, or run marathons, and maintain their periods because they're eating enough. But it's not like you go from after your 3rd period, now I'm going to train for a marathon. Like,
for sure,
that's probably going to be a little bit too fast. So just kind of taking things a little bit more slowly.
Totally.
In terms of recovery time, when I did the survey for my book, I asked this question. I have a blog post. It's at noperiod.info/time. And I talk about not only that, so the median time to recovery was about 5 months in that group of women. And what's really interesting is that there didn't seem to be any correlation between the length of time that somebody did not have a period and how long it took her to get her period back. So for somebody that's had a missing period for 20 years, that can be really encouraging, because it's like, you don't have to take 20 years to get your period back. Your time frame is going to be quite similar to somebody who's only been missing their period for a year. So that data was out there. And then I found more recently in my Facebook support groups that there seemed to be a lot more women who were recovering a lot more quickly than that, like 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months. So I did a sort of very non-scientific survey in that population. And it seemed that the median time to recovery from going all in was more like 3 months. So I think one of the reasons it was longer in my initial population is that these were women who came to the Fertile Thoughts message board, maybe already having tried some things like, going what we call half in, which is maybe you're not eating as much, maybe you're still doing some kinds of high intensity exercise. So that was sort of counted towards that median 5 month recovery time. So I think now that my book is out there and like there's a much more clear idea of what all in really means, people are getting their periods back faster because they're doing what their body needs and what's making their body happy.
Yeah, I mean, I can attest to that because I know I was 5 months, but 2 of those months were half in. So, but then like, as soon as went all in, it came a lot faster, and I was a 10-year no period person. So like you said, it's very encouraging to hear, like when I was hearing that, I'm like, oh gosh, I don't need to wait 2 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's awesome. So where can people find out more information about you? I know you have a book. Where can they find out about working with you, your social media? Where can they find you?
So my website is www.noperiodnowwhat.com.
I'll put it in the video description for people.
From there. My Facebook group is at noperiod.info/support. If for anybody that's watching this that has amenorrhea, I highly encourage you to join. It's a place where you can vent about stuff, but it's also a place where you see just about every day the positive stories, not only of women getting their periods back, but also of the positive impact that doing this has had on their lives.
Yep.
It's not just about the period. It's about learning that you do not have to absolutely control everything that goes in your mouth all day. And you don't have to spend the mental energy on that.
Yes.
You don't have to exercise every single damn day in order to be fit and healthy. You can do other things with your life. You can spend time with friends and family, and that actually helps relieve stress as well, for the most part. I mean, there are obviously some family members who are
for sure
helpful, but
finding
people and surrounding yourself with people and social interactions can be really helpful with kind of reducing stress. So support group is really, I think it's great, and I've gotten so much positive feedback.
I love the group. It helped me so much.
And then working with me, noperiod.info/appointments. I have a whole range of different sort of amounts of time that people can work with me. It can be a single question, 10-minute, or it can be a half hour. It can be working with me for 6 weeks or 6 sessions. So lots of different options. Because for me, this is not about making money. It's about helping people recover. Like, I cannot tell you how fulfilling doing this work is for me, like so much more than anything I've done in my entire life. And so, obviously the money is nice, but it's not my driver for why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because, reading about people getting their periods back and, the bone density increases and getting pregnant when they were told, oh, you're going to have to use IVF, like that warms my heart and my soul every day. And that's why I do this.
Love that. I will put all those links in the video description so people can get to those. Well, that's all the questions I have. So thank you so much for taking this hour I know this is going to be super, super impactful for so many women, and it's going to be so helpful. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate your time and, the ability to share this with more people. Cause like I said, that's what really, that's what this is all about for me.
Amazing. Well, I will put those links in and then people will find you. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Wasn't that so amazing? Nicola has so much information about really healing your relationship with food in your body and restoring your period, and I can tell you that it works because I've done it. So I'd love to know what you thought of this interview. If you have any questions or comments for me or Nicola, you can leave a comment below and let me know. I'd also love to hear if you have anyone else you'd love me to interview. So I really hope that you really learned from this interview that our weight does not equal our worth. So we can cross that off. We can drop it off, and I'll see you in the next video.